Hello, everyone. We had a long semester in our first graduate course, Q course 511-1. It was the first edition. Yeah, this is kind of 6 months and some days since we start to design the course, and probably we will spend another month to prepare some technical report about the statistics, etc. This course organized by QWorld and University of Latvia together. There was already one doctoral study program course about quantum programming, and we open it through the QWorld and we access several people. I will also share soon. And we had a supporter. They are always supporting us, Unitary Fund. And first of all, I would like to thank for their support. Second, they also agreed to, let's say, introduce once more about Unitary Fund and their microgrant program. In our course, we had project phase. Students work 1 month project. And this week, we are also starting new course. It's focusing on the project. We hope that maybe some projects their members can consider, they can develop in a way that maybe after finishing, they can really apply also such microgrants. I guess this microgrant also kind of a starting point. Maybe you can have a startup in the future, or I don't know, you can make an open community work. So there are, I think, many directions. This microgrant would be like your first step, and you will get also some money. Why not? Okay, so we will follow little non-linear way due to time constraints. We will start with Sarah. She is now core member, I think I can say, of the Unitary Fund. Basically, she's also operating Unitary Fund Discord server. It's quite active. And Sarah, let me give you the stage, and thanks also accepting to give a talk.
Absolutely. And thank you, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I was super excited when we saw the proposal for this course in the first place, and I really look forward to future instances and other folks picking up and using it, because I think it's some really useful content that it isn't necessarily reflected in other kind of other spaces. So yeah, I'm going to just talk really briefly about kind of what Unitary Fund does and where where we might be useful to you in your either quantum or other open source development careers. I was going to ask, and I don't know if I can see it on Zoom, but has anybody here contributed to open source before? I think probably a fair few people. But nice. Yeah, I know, Amir. Sweet. So just for some context around, because Unitary Fund basically works a lot in the quantum open source space. So not all of our microgrants or projects necessarily are open source, but pretty much all of them are. So what I mean when I say open source here is not only like what we kind of normally think of is the software, or whatever code or software that you write being freely accessible, but it's also and honestly, largely the community around those projects. So things like licenses, governance, the actual people contributing, blogging, etc. So like all of this is also a part of quantum open source. And sometimes I get the question, like in general, why would you want to contribute to open source things in the first place? And this is kind of the part of the argument I'm going to make or present to you is you are, especially with the projects that you're working on, what you've learned from these courses, you're in a really good position to kind of, no matter how you want to take your career, use the quantum open source community and space to launch that or continue accelerating that. So one cool thing, as I think most of you know, is that quantum technologies in large part are open source. So like they were from the beginning and they continue to today, which kind of gives a lot of us a really, if there's problems or bugs or whatever, you can literally just go look at the source code, which is a lot easier than trying to go through like company support channels and stuff like that. Also, it makes it a lot easier to iterate. So like if you know, maybe say as part of your project, you implemented kind of a new circuit optimization technique or something like that, you can just add it, or at least propose to add it to some of these projects. It's also it's a skill building thing. So, you know, regardless of whether you want, you know, whether you have a job already or want to get a job either in quantum or software dev industry or academia, like open source stuff is like a portfolio. You know, it's not the same as published papers, but I think there's, you know, some gatekeeping and stuff around publishing such that you can really have a lot more control of what you're presenting and what skills you can build. Because like honestly, in my I did a PhD in physics. I really wish a lot of these skills were things that I had actually learned in my degree. And as mentioned, like so many companies are hiring right now, and showing open source contributions, whether it's code or documentation, is very, very good pro on your CV. So we kind of talked about this a little bit, but what does it mean to actually contribute? Obviously, pretty straightforwardly, it's writing code and adding those to repos, like I think a lot of you did for your projects. But there's a ton more things that you can do that are still very important and very valid contributions. Maybe this is obvious to most people, but I think a lot of times people really focus on the code part, and this comes also into our microgrants. So obviously, the curriculum development for this course isn't necessarily code, but it is a really important contribution to the, you know, the open quantum space in that there are more materials, whether, you know, educational materials around it. So yeah, like to what I was saying earlier, a lot of these projects have communities, and honestly, this is one of my favorite things to work with in the open source space is all the amazing people working on them, working on the projects and whatnot. And I think you guys know most of these things, but yeah, projects have documentations and workflows. Out of curiosity, how many of your projects for this course are already open source? Like I saw there's lots of documentation in the GitLab repo, but has anybody like made their own repo for it and kind of have a project set up that way?
We kind of push them to make it open source.
Okay, cool.
Like, and then they can decide how they want to
Gotcha.
continue. But until during the course, yeah, we make it. We made it
Gotcha.
open source.
So this is awesome. Everybody's kind of been through this process then of setting up a project. So yeah, as given that open source isn't just the code, quantum community or communities around these projects are really important. QWorld is honestly one of my favorite groups in this space. Like I think they do so much great work around not only like training, but talks, and just the entire community around it is amazing. We also do some of different sorts of community things at Unitary Fund. As Abu mentioned, we have a Discord, and I'm excited to announce here for the first time publicly our Unitary Hack 2022 is going to be June 3 through 17. So that's basically a hackathon where it's only contributions to open source projects with bounties. So you get paid to enhance and or contribute to open source projects. Let's see. Yeah, there's also lots of really good, if you're looking for resources because you have started a project and want to kind of follow best practices for that. There's lots of good resources along those lines, especially if you're looking at applying for a microgrant. Obviously, none of that is required, but they can be really good things to take a look at and kind of bring some of that experience and knowledge from like the general open source software space to your project. So yeah, where does Unitary Fund, now that I've kind of like outlined what I mean here by open source and the open source community around it. Unitary Fund, our goal is to create a quantum technology ecosystem that benefits the most people. So we kind of do two primary things. As mentioned, we have microgrants. So those are $4,000 US, no strings attached, to basically anyone who wants to apply. There's no requirements for your position. There's no requirements for like employment or experience. Like they're evaluated on a rolling basis, so there's no deadlines. It's really whenever you have an idea or have a group or a project outlined that you want to submit an application for. So a lot of that program is supported by donations from other kind of quantum industry, but also more general tech companies that are interested in applications of quantum computing. But you can see the logo soup there on the right. But the other part of what we do is called the Unitary Fund Labs, and sorry, does someone have a question? Okay. Makes sense. Thanks, Amir. Yeah, so the other thing that we kind of do is given that we're kind of in this kind of quantum software, quantum open source space, is we kind of can find where there might be pieces missing. And then we have our own research and development team that works to kind of build things to address those gaps. So right now we're working on a project called Mitic, which there's some folks here who have worked with Mitic, and we'll be giving a presentation on that. So I'll leave that description to them. But we also have another project called Metric, where we're working on a, if you've ever seen the Papers with Code site from the machine learning space, basically a similar kind of community reporting website for quantum benchmarks. So if you're interested in benchmarking or whatever, please take a look at metric.io, or sorry, metric.info, or get in touch. But yeah, our goal with that is to not only develop our own projects, but really kind of work with other existing projects or possibly microgrants that apply. So like we don't necessarily have any guaranteed like mentorship agreements per se for microgrants, but the way they are reviewed is on a champion system. So we see all the applications. We have an advisory board of, I think, 20 or so people that look at all the applications each time. And if they see one that they are particularly interested in or think would be a good candidate, they champion it, or they say, hey, let's fund this one. So usually what happens is if somebody champions a project, they will often also kind of mentor it because it's something of interest to them. So you might ask, what sorts of things, what sorts of grants have we given out? So there are kind of some fairly straightforward ones that are like quantum software packages, so things like simulators, network modeling, circuit layout sorts of things. We also have given grants to folks contributing to different parts of Mitic as well. Really, your microgrant proposal doesn't necessarily need to be an entirely new project. It can be adding a feature to another project. So like we funded things that have added features to Qiskit or added features to QNetSim here actually. So like you don't think you have to like come up with an entirely new project. Adding parts or improving parts of projects is also totally fair game. As noted, we also fund projects that aren't specifically code. So there's a bunch of different communities we supported, including QWorld, Qubit by Qubit. We also support a couple different like open textbooks or living textbooks. So one that I really like, and you should definitely check out if you're interested in quantum algorithms, is just quantumalgorithms.org. But it's created and maintained by a bunch of grad students and faculty working on quantum algorithms, and kind of serves to be or aims to be effectively textbook listing, most known quantum algorithms, and expanding on, not just kind of like abstracts about them, but actually has a lot of details about proofs and things in the descriptions of the algorithms. So definitely a good resource if you're kind of doing a lot of stuff on the algorithm side. I also really liked one of the projects was a mashing up of quantum algorithms and fairy tales, and kind of explaining the quantum algorithm as a solution or like as the resolution of the problem in the fairy tale. So, there's kind of a wide range here. So you might also ask, what is the actual application process? It basically, I want to say it's like 7 or 8 questions total. So we're not talking about like a full, I think about academic grant applications usually take days to weeks to write and prepare. We're really aiming here to be much, much lighter weight than that. Basically, there's a question or two about the description of the project, what you would plan to do with the money. Maybe that's pay your salary, pay someone else's, to help out. It could be paying for web hosting. If you need hardware credits because what you're working on in the microgrant is executing on hardware and stuff, we also have partners who would provide that separately. So you don't have to, the money doesn't have to go to hardware time, just for the record. We have that with IBM, Rigetti, and Azure Quantum. So basically anyone on the market you can get hardware time for. But yeah, so the only other part really to the application is a 2-minute video. So basically, because we can't necessarily schedule calls with every application, like even video from your phone is totally fine. Just you talking about what you want to do or your project in your own words. So yeah, I would say, if you have your project idea kind of roughly worked out, I would hope it wouldn't take you more than 30 minutes to an hour to submit the application. And you can submit as many as you want, and you can reapply as many times as you want. We always try to give good feedback. So if we do reject an application, we will try to write up some feedback for the applicant to let them know, like, either what they could change to make it an application that we would consider funding, or try and connect them with people. Maybe somebody's working on something very similar to something else and they weren't aware of that. We try to connect them with the other group or team or whatever so that they can collaborate. But in the end, it's really communities of people that are actually making quantum technologies work. So like Unitary Fund's goal, like QWorld's goal, let's make it open, welcoming, and safe for everyone to contribute. So yeah, that's basically all I have. But if you have, so you can read more about us, read more about all the grants we've given out, our events and everything. We host a lot of talks and community calls for the open source projects. So you can actually meet the maintainers for the projects and chat, ask them questions or get some advice on anything you want to add to the projects. So that's pretty much all on discord.unitary.fund. Our website is also unitary.fund, and you can find me in all of those places, and also on Twitter, usually. I'm very much on Twitter, but crazy for Pi314. Yeah, I think that's it. If there's any questions, I'll take them in chat.
Yes, thank you very much. Is there any question? You may raise your hand or write in the chat. Maybe I can have one question. In our projects, there were a tendency, we also encourage them, of course, they try to have some tutorials for some, different topics. First of all, which topics would be more interesting? Which direction may be interesting? Second is maybe some simple tips, like how they should prepare or There are already many resources, so I think there is also competition. It's not easy to even get a grant, maybe a few tips in which way they have more chance or something like this.
Absolutely. So topics, we have a page on the website for ideas for topics that our different advisors are somewhat interested in. I know at least me personally, I'm really excited about kind of the quantum compiler stack and what intermediate representations. So like, we can write quantum programs and algorithms in front-end languages like Qiskit or Q# or Cirq or whatever. But how does that actually get to hardware? I think there's a lot of interesting software and honestly like algorithms level questions, like where does pulse control sit? So like tutorials kind of looking at either what's already out there or what might be ideal would be, I don't know, would be interesting to me personally, but there's a large list on the website for more people's opinions on that. For things that would make your application more interesting, or at least more competitive, I think having a repo set up is a really good start, because usually if that's the first thing when I look at an application, if they have any examples of their code or writing samples or something like that, if it's not code based, those are really helpful. Just having, it doesn't have to be fully fleshed out, it doesn't have to be perfect, but just kind of show that you know how to kind of set up that piece of it. Especially any documentation associated. So like if you have a repo with just code in it, that's obviously great, but even just having stuff in your README that you can see on the main page is very helpful. I do see a lot of applications that don't have that, and then I have to go not that I dislike looking at source, but I have a lot to look at, so it takes more time. Other things, I think something that we see a lot in microgrant applications is scopes that are too big. So the most common feedback that we give to grantees is like, this is a great idea, we love it, we want to fund it, but the timescales that we usually kind of suggest for the grants are like 4 to 6 months. So the project might be amazing, but clearly will take a year or something like that. We want to fund it, but what we often do is we suggest to people to kind of downscope it. So like that doesn't necessarily mean not do the rest of the project, but just like pick a more achievable chunk for a 4 to 6 time period. Like even if that's just setting up the project and getting infrastructure, and that's okay. It doesn't have to always be like a fully complete closed cycle sort of project for the grant. But yeah, I think thinking about scoping and what you can, it's not bad to be ambitious, but it's also fair to be realistic, because we do often see a lot of, even ones that we do fund, like they get a lot of it done, but they often don't achieve everything that they want. So, and that's okay. Like we also don't have a success metric here. Like if you do get a microgrant, basically what happens is we send you the first half of the money. You work on it for however long you say the grant lasts. We'll check in with you about halfway through, and just honestly to see if there's anything we can do to help. So if there's things you're stuck on, or there's like connections or introductions you need made for the collaboration, that's fine. Then if you show up to that, then we'll send you the second half of the money. And yeah, usually we check in with folks at the end too, just to kind of see where you got to. But as noted, there's no achievement requirements to get the money really. So yeah.
Thank you. So Halil Ibrahim asked, I guess, what would be the best for communication? Is email or Discord or both?
They're all good. I'll put my email in chat, but it's just sarah@unitary.fund.
Okay. Another question, Kaushik Ghosh. I think he asking topic about quantum cryptography, quantum resistance ledger, etc. Do you have any comment about
We haven't done much in the,
cryptocurrency? Sorry, it's not cryptocurrency.
yeah,
I'm very
it's
sorry.
cryptocurrency. We've
Yeah.
done some stuff in post-quantum crypto algorithms. Like we funded a project or two in that space, but I don't think cryptocurrency would be something that we would necessarily fund. Kind of out of scope in some sense for things that move forward quantum technology specifically. And the other one was, is there any project related to quantum error mitigation? Yes. Well, there's our project Mitic, and we funded a couple people to add features to that. But there is, we've had some pulse level control projects where people have looked at addressing errors at the pulse level. But we'd certainly be super excited to see more applications or projects around error mitigation as well. Like what I said was purely my own personal interest. I don't think there's really anything that is not interesting to us. I think the primary, okay, I'll take that back. One thing that probably is not necessarily going to be competitive in terms of a microgrant is specifically visualization for block spheres. Like things around everything else, like if you're using them to do something else, but if it's literally just an engine to plot things on block spheres, there's a lot of stuff already in that space. So we do get a lot of applications about those and mostly have to suggest adding other features or making some other sort of differentiators. But certainly there are lots of cool ones, and maybe consider adding to one of the other projects if there's something that you're working on there. But yeah, I think that's the only thing we see a huge we see a lot of applications for the same thing.
Okay, Tuba has a question. The amount is the same for each project, or can it be different somewhat?
So for each microgrant, they are always $4,000, but certain projects have applied for multiple microgrants. So, and we've also kind of been considering or exploring, like, if a project is something that we really like or that was really successful, considering just automatic follow-on funding. We haven't tried doing that yet, but it's something we're definitely trying to think about and figure out. But basically what we encourage at that point is just apply for another microgrant. Like there's no rules that you can only get one. So like I think QWorld has gotten 3 or 4. I don't know.
3 we got, and we will increase year by year.
Yeah.
We got a counter
I mean,
now, unitary counter.
You guys are doing great stuff, so I'm happy to give as many microgrants as we have. So percentage, Giannis asked real quick.
What is the
percentage of projects that have been funded? Yeah, so I think the percentage like funded is probably, I think it's like somewhere between 20 and 30%. So that's I don't have anything based on like one normalizing for resubmissions and stuff like that. But yeah, we generally, the limitation for how many we can give out is how much funding we've been donated for that year. But so far it's been somewhere around 20 microgrants a year. So yeah, that's kind of been our target, but it is part of our mission and whatnot to basically we will give out as many as we can. If we have 30 projects in a year that we think all deserve microgrants, we'd probably figure out how to do it. But yeah, so this isn't necessarily as hard of a like application process necessarily as like some academic grants and stuff like that are like 1 or 2%. And there are definitely projects in QML that's definitely a huge area too. So QML projects, definitely submit.
I think you also published a yearly report recently.
Yeah,
Maybe they
yeah.
can also check it for further details.
Yeah, definitely. If you just on our website, we have a blog that has all the details, but we have it's got a breakdown too. Like our microgrants are given out to a lot. Like the global distribution of where we award the grants is pretty big. So like there's lots and lots that are not just Europe and North America sorts. So yeah, I think that's one of the things that I'm most excited about, and certainly am excited about kind of moving forward, is trying to get some of the support for these quantum technologies to places that won't necessarily have it directly, either from universities or governments.
Is there any further question?
Are small grants below 4K possible for very specific needs? We have done that occasionally. Like someone needed podcasting equipment, so we gave them, a few $100s for that. Yeah, I mean, feel free to use the same application process. You can note whatever you need, but yeah, there isn't like a different process for that. So, but great question.
So any other question?
I know you have a schedule to keep to, so I'll definitely be in chat for the next 30 or so minutes. And as noted, you can always send me emails, find me on Twitter, find me on Discord. I am always very happy to sit down and virtually and chat. Like if you have a project that you're thinking about, you want to submit for a microgrant and you want to just kind of talk through it or get advice on what you can do specifically about your project, please feel free to reach out. That's what I'm here for.
Yeah, thank you very much.